right, what's up, New York? How's it going? I'm Ross Facaturo, bringing you guys the 65th episode of the Apples to Apples podcast. The All-Star game has come and gone, the All-Star game weekend, all the festivities, the derby, the game itself, the swing-off that we were introduced to for the first time that wound up giving the National League the 6-7 win, 6-7, if you know, you know. um, just like the whole concept in general kind of sparked debate whether or not it was meant for, if it was the right way to cap off a All-Star game. That, look, if you look at, the All-Star game concept in general across all sports, I mean, the Pro Bowls unanimously hate it so much so they don't even play actual football anymore. They do like the whole water balloon fights and dodgeball and like basically like gym class activities. Basketball has kind of become like a 60-minute three-point contest. They did like a different structure this year with the bracket. The NHL completely scrapped their All-Star game. Did the Four Nations face-off that, hey, even like non-hockey fans thought was a great idea. And they, I think they got like 15,000 plus people to tune in. Obviously, that U.S.-Canada infamous game that had the line brawl. But in general, I mean, the All-Star game has looked like it's become a thing of the past. And I think the MLB, while it hasn't really salvaged it by any means, I think got a lot of people that were tuned out otherwise to finally tune in and bring a little bit of attention to it. I mean, you had Cal Raleigh. I always want to say Cal Raleigh win the Derby itself on Monday night, beat Junior Caminero in the finals. There was a whole debate about whether or not Brent Rooker got robbed. The way they format it is like the top four highest totals in the first round. They don't do a bracket from the first round to the last anymore. They do the top four highest totals, then they make a bracket from there. And Cal Raleigh was actually on the chopping block. He was the fourth highest total in that first round and actually tied with Brent Rooker. But the thing was that the tiebreaker is longest home run, and they actually tied on that too in terms of whole numbers. So they brought it to like a decimal count. Raleigh won it by like a tenth, a hundredth of a foot, and Rooker was kind of complaining, they don't really show the number to the decimal. They don't show the distance to the decimal unless they need to. And I kind of felt like, if that's going to be useful information down the road, that kind of feels like something you should show in general. But regardless, advanced Raleigh to the second round. Boy, oh boy, that's going to be one. I got to get past at some point. The Raleigh, this, that, etc. But Raleigh advanced to the second round, winds up winning the whole thing, whereas Rooker didn't even see the second round. Obviously, the whole thing, I think Raleigh's the first catcher ever to win it. He's like, it's a really low number in terms of people who lead the league in homers at the break who participate in the Derby and wind up winning the thing. There's only like a handful of people to lead the league in homers and win that year's Derby. He got added to that list, and I think he's the first Mariner to win it too. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Griffey won the infamous one in Baltimore. I'm not sure about that one, but I know he's the first catcher and one of few people to lead the league in homers and win that year's Derby as well. So Cal Raleigh taking the Derby in the All-Star game. The NL has won like one of the past 12 games. They were up 6-0 at one point, got to Tariq Skubal early, and then they wound up blowing it. The AL came back, tied it up at 6 on a little, like blimper hit off the bat of Stephen Kwan. Infield single. AL ties it down to their final out in the top of the ninth. NL puts up a goose egg in the bottom of the ninth, and some people thought we were going extra innings. We wound up getting the first ever swing off. And what it wound up being a lot of confusion as to what the format was, how it was going to work, who was going to decide it. It's like how the batters were picked. It gets revealed that the three hitters that were sent out there, so if you didn't see it, 3 hitters per league, you get 3 swings, homers or outs. Regardless, whoever's got the most homers after 3 swings off 3 batters wins the game. And the list of how they decided who both teams were sending out to participate in this was apparently decided before the game even started. Aaron Boone for the AL, Dave Roberts for the NL, apparently they had to submit their three-man list if there was the rare possibility of having to go to this swing off, which wound up happening. So for the AL, it was Brent Rooker, Randy Arozarena, and Jonathan Aranda. For the NL, Kyle Stowers, Kyle Schwarber, and Pete Alonso. Now, those aren't really your 6 household power hitters in the league, even at the game at that point. I mean, Rooker, yes. Alonzo Schwarber, yes. But, you don't really think of Kyle Stowers and a Ronda. Even a Rosarena is kind of in the middle. But, you're thinking, like, where's the Aaron Judge? Where's the Cal Raleigh? Where's the Kyle Tucker, the Ohtani, et cetera? You know what I mean? And it turns out some of them you got to think, probably left the game by that point. They're thinking, these hitters, they see one inning, one at bat, maybe 2 innings in the field if they're lucky. It depends on kind of the guy. But if you're talking about people who started the game, so like the Judges and the Ohtanis of the world, they're probably out of there by the time they're out of the game. They probably hang around for another inning or two, but they're not waiting there for the whole 9-inning game. And it kind of, if you look at Judge, he kind of feels like the one exception because the Yankees are staying in Atlanta. Their first immediate series after the break is at Truist Park against the Braves, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But, other than that, I mean, guys like Ohtani with the, Freeman was there too, like with the Dodgers. They're probably going on trips. They got to fly back out to the team wherever they're starting back up. Even guys like Skubal and Skeens, like they flashed to Skubal. Skubal was back in street clothes. He was out of the uniform, everything. Like he was there at the park for the swing off. Obviously, he's not going to participate in it, but it shows that some of the bats that started the game probably changed and were on their 1 foot out the door of the stadium looking to go spend the rest of their All-Star break vacation or whatnot. But at the same time, there were some better bats like Bobby Witt, I think had been in the game or like had just recently gotten taken out of the game. Byron Buxton was still there. There was one thing like Eugenio Suarez was supposed to be one of the 3 for the NL, so you got to assume he was going to be there in place of Kyle Stowers. But if you watch the game, he actually got plunked. He got plunked on the side of the hand. And there was a little bit of a concern, not only for the obviously the well-being of Suarez. It's not like he got hit in the head, but still, you fear a broken hand for a D-back team that's kind of on the fence, whether or not they're competing, whether they're selling. I mean, they're like the wild card, no pun intended with wild card. They're like the X factor with this upcoming deadline. They're either going to be a threat for the wild card chase. That's, down to I think it's the Brewers, Mets, and Padres right now, but the Giants are right there. The Reds are hovering around 500. And the D-backs are right there too. Or, they go the other way and sell off some of these pieces that are on expiring contracts or, got player options or whatnot that might not be in their big picture vision. And Eugenio Suarez is probably example A of all of that. He's like 4th in the league in home runs. They brought him in last year, I think was when they brought him in, right? He's been great. He's a solid fielder. He's not Nolan Arenado. He's not going to win you a platinum glove, but he's good enough with the glove. And he's one of the most dynamic power hitters in the league. And for a D-backs team that they don't know if they're competing or not, they're still, undecided on which way they're going to go. And I saw there was one report that said there's 4 names in particular. It's Suarez, Josh Naylor, Zach Gallen, and Merrill Kelly are the names that they're reportedly shopping them more than anybody. Because you look, Ketel Marte's big picture. Corbin Carroll is going to be the face of that team for years down the road. And you got to keep in mind, this is a team that 2 years ago won the pennant. I know they did it as like the 6 seed, the Cinderella story and everything, but like that team on paper, looking back, it really isn't that big of a surprise that they made. It's a surprise that they went on the run. But what I'm trying to say is like the team on paper is pretty damn good. And they didn't lose much from that team 2 years ago. Like Suarez wasn't on that team. Naylor wasn't on that team. Randall Grichuk wasn't on that team. They had Jock Peterson last year when they were still, it came down to that game 161 between the Mets and Braves to eliminate them there. They were in the wild card race the entirety of the year pretty much, along with San Diego, the Mets, and the Braves. And the team really hasn't got much different. Now, I'll say the one thing with the pitching. This is where I'm kind of hesitant. So I guess we'll segue. So we'll kind of move past the All-Star game talk. We'll get into the whole thing with the, the deadline coming up, right? We're talking about the D-backs being like one of the go-to teams to keep an eye on. Like it kind of changes the whole perspective of if you're a team that's in the market of acquiring some players for the home stretch of the season. They're probably the team that all these contenders are crowding around because they got all sorts of assets to plunk off their roster. And I think if you look at where the D-backs, how good their lineup is, the pitching not so much. It's not only a lack of depth, like Jordan Montgomery going down. They had Corbin Burns for the first 2 months of the year, but he had the thing with his elbow was all jacked up, so he's going to miss the next year and a half. If you're talking about Zach Gallen is a guy who like 2 years ago was not only great, was legitimately a perennial Cy Young candidate. I think he was even a finalist a couple years ago, like one of the top 3 finalists. He didn't win it, but his numbers were up to the level of guys like Zach Wheeler and Alcantara when he won his Cy Young. And that's another guy whose numbers have kind of tailed off since then. But Zach Gallen was one of the most dynamic pitchers in the NL, and you could even say all of the MLB. And his ERA right now is like north of 5. His numbers are ugly. Merrill Kelly's aren't much better. I think he missed some time with injury, though, speaking on Kelly. But their pitching has not been good. Brandon Pfaadt's another one who's had a really down year, and he's supposed to be one of their promising younger arms. The bullpen feels like one of the worst, if not the worst, in baseball. I mean, they flash stats sometimes that I think they got the most blown leads in the 8th inning or later. So this isn't so much a bad team. They're just a situationally stupid team. And it's come back to bite them so many times that they're at the point now where they're hovering between over and under 500. They don't know if they're even making the postseason in the first place. If they do wind up making it, how far are they going to go? They're probably thinking big picture, and they're saying, if we're thinking, bigger for the long run, it's probably better off we move a guy like Suarez that his value is pretty much as high as it's going to be, because he's having probably his best season besides 2019. I think he almost hit 50 homers. He had an absurd amount. I think he was like second or third in the league. But that's when he was with Cincinnati, by the way. But this year has been really damn good too. So much so he's in the All-Star game. He almost got hurt. We were talking about before. And that was like the whole concern, but he was supposed to be in that swing off. I think him getting plunked, they called an audible, brought Stowers in. Long story short, Schwarber tees off, goes 3 for 3, wins the All-Star game MVP. And if you're a Met fan like me, there's a long list of what ifs that Cohen, said, nah, I'm good to in the offseason. Teoscar Hernandez, Kyle Schwarber, just to name a few. Last year's Home Run Derby champion, this year's All-Star Game MVP, 2 former World Series champions, or at least Hernandez won his last year. They're probably 1A, 1B in terms of the biggest what-ifs that Cohen and the Mets front office passed up on. And I'm looking at Schwarber, you're saying, hey, what was he, like a mid-30s, 35, 36? I'm not sure the exact age. And he's basically a plug at DH. Well, we're talking about a DH spot that the Mets are probably, no joke, of the 15 teams in the NL, they're probably the one team that has not only benefited the least from the DH, they're probably wishing they still had pitchers hitting, because they had some pitchers who were solid with the stick. You had DeGrom, could get you a base hit here and there. Syndergaard was pretty good at the plate. I think Steven Matz, his first at bat ever in the majors was a double. So obviously, look, like 9 times out of 10, they're not going to get on base, but that kind of feels like what our designated hitter spot is in the lineup too. We'll get to the lineup in a second. Vientos is batting second at DH, and you kick a man when he's down. Vientos, it goes without saying how bad of a season he's had, right? You got spots where Winker was at the DH spot, Marte, they're both currently on the IR. Winker kind of segues into the what and what not to do with deadlines. When you look at how the Mets handled the 22 deadline versus last year's, 2 completely different teams in terms of expectations. He had the 2022 team that was on the cusp, on pace at the time to wind up winning 100-plus games, which they wound up doing, and it crashed and burned in a 3-game wild card series. Then you have last year, where kind of like the Dbacks this year, there was up until the day of the deadline whether or not there was a question as to whether or not this team's serious about competing, serious about contending for the playoffs, how far they're going to go in the playoffs, and they wound up pulling the trigger and buying. You brought in Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton for the Pen, Brazoban from the Marlins, and Jesse Winker was the one bat they brought in. It almost feels like Jesse Winker at the DH spot was better than anything Vogelbach and Darren Ruff brought to you in 2022. And Vogelbach was all right down the stretch. He was god-awful the year after. Darren Ruff maybe got on base 3 times the entire time he was with the organization. So the whole dream, analytically envisioned platoon at the DH spot between Vogelbach and Ruff was one of the biggest disasters to date in terms of, deadline approaches. But they got Winker last year. He wound up paying off, and they brought him back, so much so paying off. They brought him back this year along with Minaya and Pete, and he spent the better part of the season on the IR. Now, when he's been on the field, he's been all right. He had that clutch triple early on against Toronto. He came back for like 3 at-bats, went right back to the IR. So I think they've been kind of shuffling between Vientos at the DH spot. I'm not sure who else they might put there. Maybe Mauricio, because now you got this revolving door. And that kind of begs to ask the question. I brought up Josh Naylor before. I wouldn't mind seeing Josh Naylor in this lineup. A lefty stick. You put him at DH. He's pretty much as bona fide of a DH as you're going to see in this league. And I know he's been playing first for the Dbacks, but you got Pete there. And if you need, you need a rest day for Pete and, on the diamond, you put him at the DH, put Naylor at first. You kind of got like, that's a legitimate platoon. It's not talking about, Darren Ruff, who had been playing in Japan 3 years prior, and Vogelbach, who, enough said. And honestly, talking about third base, Vientos, Mauricio, Beatty, all these highly touted third basemen that have come up through the system and have not sniffed their full potential. You talk about Vientos last year, the year he had, almost eclipsed 30 homers and set the franchise record for RBIs in a single postseason, but that all went out the window with how shit he's been this year. And we're not even talking about a sophomore slump anymore. The most positive shill of a fan you'll see has officially bent the knee and also agreed that what we're seeing out of Mark Vientos is the furthest thing from enough. And there's many people that are starting to doubt if this is just like a fork in the road or if this is who he really is. And last year was kind of the exception. Mauricio is another guy. I mean, I know he missed all of last year. I know we were kind of feeding off like the 10 at-bats we saw in late 2023. I was part of it. I was saying, we had got a whole year as great of a magic carpet ride as last year was. Right, nobody hit a ball harder than Ronnie Mauricio on that September night against the Mariners. He hit it like 115. Guy laced it, and he looked like the flash on the bases. That looked like a guy like, all right, this is the 5-tool player, that's been coming up through the majors year after year. They bring him up. He's been all right. He's been all right at best. And I mean, Beatty, he's probably been the best out of the three this year, but he almost feels like the most wasted potential out of the three because at least you saw something genuinely out of Vientos last year. You have to like completely cherry pick to find Brett Beatty, like a solid stretch of success out of Brett Beatty. He had like a week this year and it's still not what he was supposed to be. So that's pretty much currently as we speak, 0 for 3 on top prospect third baseman. And that kind of segues into my point. I clipped it, posted it last episode, the whole PCA thing. Brett Beatty, you trade him before seeing what he's supposed to be at the MLB level. You're saying, why would you give up on a guy so early? Ronnie Mauricio, same thing. Vientos, same thing. Francisco Alvarez, same thing. You're seeing all these guys in the organization, and you could only help but think if they went out and acquired a guy, I don't know, you name a guy that they could go buy in the offseason or at a deadline and just, happen to think, what if they gave up on this guy and took the chance of him going out and being a star somewhere else, but got the immediate benefit? They didn't with any of them, and you're getting little to nothing out of every single one of them. Some of them aren't even on the MLB roster. I mean, it's as bad as it's going to get. PCA is the anomaly because even some of the ones they did cut bait with, Jared Kelenick's out of the league. Med Rosario's, shuffling through 3 organizations per year. He's a DFA every month. Andres Jimenez is a good player. He's got a platinum glove, so he's had a good career. He's not the franchise second baseman the Mets were thinking they were going to envy for years, and we're going to have to bite the bullet to bring in a guy like Lindor. I mean, PCA is the huge exception, and because he's having the year he's having, he's a borderline MVP favorite. I think Ohtani's a favorite, but he's like the second in line. So I'm not underestimating what he's doing whatsoever, but I just pray, I pray that the Mets don't look at how the PCA situation unfolded and kind of all of a sudden prospect talk, we can't have a PCA situation again. You're looking at guys like Beatty, Mauricio, Vientos, Alvarez, Acuna is another one, throw him into the mix that you went 0 for 5 on. And a guy like Kelenic, I know it's a different administration, but a guy that you did cut bait with and it wound up benefiting you, bringing you Edwin Diaz. You ate the money with Cano, but Edwin Diaz, you probably make that trade again. Majority of people probably make that trade again. PCA is the one exception. You can't let that linger and let it affect trades down the road, and it better not for the David Stearns, Steve Cohen front office and company. It's just got to be something you move on. You say, we lost that particular trade, but we got to move on. And I hope guys like Chet Williams and Jonah Tong I saw at the Futures game, who's the other one? Brandon Sproat. If there's a trade to be had and one of those guys are the X factor between a trade happening and it not happening, I say you do it, man. There's certain players you say maybe they're not worth it. But if there's a guy, let's say in a perfect world, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I know I've seen the name in some rumors. I doubt it happens, but I'm just saying for the sake of conversation. There's a Jose Ramirez trade on the line. and they're hesitant to move on from Sproat and Tong, and they're the only reasons that trade doesn't go through, or a Jet Williams, I think they're out of their minds. But now, like I said, I'm not saying J-Rams get moved, but for that caliber of a player like a Lewis Robert, probably a little bit more realistic, that trade better happen. You just can't prospect hug because PCA is the rare exception. Beatty, Mauricio, Vientos are examples A, B, and C. And at the hot corner, and it feels like not only the last elite third baseman, but the last competent third baseman, you got to go all the way back to David Wright in this organization. And tomorrow afternoon at Citi Field, David Wright's number 5 is going to see the rafters. No New York Met will ever wear the number 5 again. And a guy with Wright, you're talking about, I think he's the only one you could say this for, the first number to be retired by the organization where that player's entire career was spent with the New York Mets. The first pitch he saw in the majors to the last pitch was all seen in the same uniform. That's something Doc Darrell can't say, unfortunately. Tom Seaver, the way he was traded to Cincinnati. Keith coming from the Cardinals. He's the first one. He only ever knows Major League Baseball in a New York Mets uniform. And obviously the way it ended, kind of the delaying the inevitable with the injury, with the spinal injury and all that, him coming out for the final 2 or 3 at bats in 2018. It's unfortunate it ended with a pop-up in foul territory, but just those first few years of his career that sadly the first couple I wasn't even alive for, and the last few, well, his entire career, he retired, I was like 10, 11 years old. So I remember him, but it's faint. And it's sad that I'm 18 years old and people my age, the majority of people my age, he's a distant, faint memory. Like, I only remember the David Wright of like 2016, 2018, pretty much, where he was damaged goods. It's the brutal, honest truth, but he was not all there. And just the numbers, especially the numbers of Shea, the numbers kind of took a hit when they opened Citi Field. Obviously, the infamous dimensions, and they built it for Jose Reyes. So the David Wright's kind of, hit the structure of where he was hitting the ball kind of took a hit. He wound up being the first Met to ever hit a home run at the new park. And just overall, I mean, Captain America with the U.S. team. He wasn't only beloved by the Met fan base, but American baseball fans. He was Captain America. He had that clutch homer. And just overall, you go down the line of some of the most memorable moments of his career. SNY put out a solid documentary. It's called The Right Way. I think it's going to re-air over the weekend. They put it out last night, though, and they kind of take a trip down memory lane of the seasons, obviously, that we don't have to get into them, but the heartbreaking finishes to 06 with Beltran looking at strike 3, and 07, the unfathomable collapse in the NL East. 08, coming down to game 162, wound up being the final game at Shea Stadium, felt like a funeral because they had to do like the whole ceremonies and everything, honoring the Mets of Shea Stadium past, like Piazza was there and all that. And this is a team that just saw their season end on the final day of the year for the second time in a row. And you lump in that third year, 2006, probably the most agonizing way a season could ever end. So that's New York Met baseball for you. But that's something that really shouldn't get in the way of David Wright's career. Like I said, first pitch in the majors to the last, we're all in the same New York Met uniform. And he's a legend, man. It kind of sucks. You look at, he's just like the next in line to not win a ring with the franchise. Inevitably when, whether Jacob deGrom gets his number retired, he should, in my opinion. But I guess there's some debate there. And even ones who aren't really in the running to get their numbers retired, like Jose Reyes and Carlos Beltran, of those 2000s teams that, look, had great seasons. And David Wright's probably at the top of that entire list because you only ever know him as a New York Met. And the way it ended with the injuries, having to delay his career, or having to cut his career short, rather, it sucks, man, because if he feels like one of your own. Like I said, I think there's something legitimately to the fact that he spent his entire career with the same organization that's been the butt of so many jokes, but he stuck through it. He took less money to stay with the team long term. I think it was 2011 he signed the extension, and he was the face of some really good and some really bad baseball. And the fact that he's able to say he hit a homer in a World Series, that's pretty damn cool. It just sucks he never wound up getting the ring for it, but David Wright's a legend in Flushing. His number 5 will be in the rafters forever. He's joining. It's Doc, Darrell, Keith, Seaver Piazza, Casey Stengel, and I think I'm forgetting somebody. There's one other in there, but David Wright, legend, Captain America, the best third baseman in the history of the team, and one of the best overall position players, one of the best overall players to ever be a New York Met. So congrats to David Wright. If you're going out to the game tomorrow, that's awesome. 4:00 first pitch. They're going to have the pregame ceremony, and it's a weekend to celebrate one of the organization's best players. So with this, I don't want this episode to go too long. So like I brought up, we're post All-Star game weekend festivities. We're officially in the second half of the season. We're going to figure out who's legit, who's not. Mets, Yankees, you feel like they're both legit. I mean, the Yankees are 2 games back of the Blue Jays for first in the AL East. Mets currently holding on to a half-game lead in the NL East, but it feels like them and the Phillies go back and forth. It's kind of like a seesaw at this point. We got the lineups, starting pitchers. I'm going to give them to you really quick, and then we're gonna call this episode right here. So for the Mets, Cincinnati's in town at Citi Field. So for the Mets, the Reds are in town. 7:10 first pitch. It's Nick Lodolo for the Reds versus Sean Manaea, our tribal chief. He's back. Looked pretty solid in that final game before the All-Star break. He took the loss. He kind of came in relief, and I put that in quotes because he pitched like 5 innings. We didn't start the game. Had like 6 or 7 punch-outs. There we go again with the with the 6-7. Mets lineup. You got Lindor leading off as short. Vientos batting second at DH. Soto third in right field. Pete batting fourth at first. Nimmo in left batting fifth. Mauricio at third batting sixth. Jeff McNeil at second batting seventh. Tyrone Taylor in center batting eighth. And Luis Torrens behind the plate batting ninth. So you kind of look at Taylor. Torrens obviously there for the defense, but we got to see some more out of the lineup, man. Both situationally and just overall, but really situationally. The numbers with runners on base, runners in scoring position, they got to get up. They got to go up a few notches because you can't ride on the magic carpet ride that you did last year when guys like Severino and Quintana looked like the second coming of Cy Young and Randy Johnson and Roger Clemens. But we got the Fab Four. Shout out Steve Cohen. I mean, the jokes wrote themselves, talking about crowning them the Fab Four, and a game later they go like 2 for 15, leave 8 guys on base. So we got to see more out of the Fab Four with Mark Vientos in the 2-hole as your top 5 bats in the lineup. And real quick with the Yankees, going with a bullpen game today. It was originally going to be Max Fried. They switched it to Ian Hamilton last second. It's going to be like a bullpen game. And then for the lineup, Trent Grisham leading off in center, Cody Bellinger at first in the 2-hole, Judge and Wright batting third, Jazz Chisholm batting cleanup at second base, Jason Dominguez in the 5-hole and left, Ben Rice DHing and at batting sixth, Anthony Volpe at short batting seventh, Austin Wells behind the plate at 8, and Jorbit Vivas batting ninth at the hot corner. Really quick with them, you're talking about a lack of prospects coming up to their full potential. Anthony Volpe is probably public enemy number 1 with the fan base, and this is a guy who not only was the best prospect in baseball, kind of like Francisco Alvarez, not only has not come close to the expectations with his numbers, but he's especially going to get hated on because of the offseason where the Yankees could have went out and signed a guy like Corey Seager, Carlos Correa, Javier Baez, the list goes on and on. They wound up sticking with their guy, and he's been all but what they thought they were getting. He can't hit. He can't field. He's a mess out there. The fans are getting on him. You see the clip with his father yelling at the Met fan in the crowd. I mean, it's been a rough stretch for Volpe. The fans are letting him hear it. And Austin Wells even. He hasn't been unplayable like Volpe, but what you saw out of him last year, you haven't really seen as much as this year, and it kind of adds insult to injury when you see Augusto Ramirez performing in Miami. Carlos Narvaez is like a long shot for Rookie of the Year with the Red Sox. He both were with you guys last year. When you see it kind of adds insult to injury when you see what Augusto Ramirez is doing with the Marlins. Carlos Narvaez he's a long shot, albeit, but having a really damn good season with the Red Sox. Jose Trevino's having a bounce back year with the Reds. So kind of these former catcher prospects in the Yankees organization going on to do bigger and better things with other organizations, while Austin Wells not really giving you much. And Ben Rice, I mean, they're forcing his hand behind the plate. And JC Escarra, albeit a great story, not really your ideal backup catcher either. So it's good problems to have when they're both 10 plus games over 500. Speaking on the Mets and Yankees, but when you kind of nitpick, there's some positions that you figure if these teams are serious about not only making the playoff runs, but it feels like you're beyond that. One team got to a seat when both teams got to a CS and one wound up winning a pennant. You feel like at this point it's World Series or bust. It feels like with this deadline coming up, both are in a spot where you can't go into the postseason with holes as big as Volpe as short and the fiasco going on with the Mets at third base. And both pitching staffs pretty much being in disarray. I mean, the Mets got what? Mania looked all right. Frankie Montas just came back. Senga, you're hoping comes back in a perfect world in about a week or two, I saw. Diaz has been doing his thing. And with the Yankees, I mean, Devin Williams is back into fruition, but now all of a sudden Luke Weaver sucks. Besides Max Fried and Carlos Rodon, who do you trust in that rotation? Will Warrens look solid. Cam Schlittler, albeit one start, he looked all right. But big picture, I mean, if there's some pitchers to go out there for even a worst case scenario, just some depth, just to have a couple bodies to go to when every other arm in the pitching staff's tired, I feel like if there's moves to be made, you got to pull the trigger on them if these teams are serious. So July 31st is the deadline. We got about a week and some change left. We'll probably talk about it in the next episode as well. But that's all for me today, man. Really quick shout out to our friends at SeatGeek. If you're going to a ball game this summer, concert as well, any show, concert, baseball game of the dog days of summer on the horizon, get your tickets to SeatGeek and use my code Apples to Apples at checkout. It's going to save you 20% off your first purchase. Once again, ball game, concert, show, you name it. Get your tickets over at SeatGeek and use my promo code Apples to Apples. It's here on the scroll on the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Code Apples to Apples on SeatGeek is going to save you 20% off your first purchase. So thank you, SeatGeek. Thank you guys for listening on Spotify, for watching on YouTube, supporting all the socials as always. And I'll see you on the next episode. Have a good one, guys.